Today I will walk you through my process for doing this well as a speed build. So to start, we'll just take a piece of this 1/4 inch foam and a cup with the base of the size you're wanting to make this well. I chose this lovely Smurfs cup and just traced that onto the foam and then slowly started cutting off all of those corners to get a nice round circle. Now from this point, we'll just start hot gluing those bricks around the base of that circle using some hot glue and parchment paper. Now the reason for using the parchment paper for this is that it will peel off nicely from the hot glue and not rip that, and also keep it nice and clean and give you a nice flat bottom to build off of. So from there we'll just start stacking up the bricks, going in the opposite pattern of the base row we started there before, and just repeat that 3 times until we get to the height we like. Now onto the post for this project. So I just took a piece of scrap foam and cut a couple of square beams about 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter and just to a height that I thought looked right, and then just cut out the chunks there so that it set nicely over those bricks and inside the well. Now the reason we're doing a speed build today is because I'm going to be doing a project here very soon. I'm probably already working on it by the time you see this, but it'll be in partnership with Cleric's Creation and a few other YouTubers who'll be doing some vertical builds. So I want to do something pretty quick for this one, and also something that would be a nice piece of scatter for your tabletop. So if you're interested in any of those projects that we'll be doing here shortly, or probably the next couple weeks, I'll have links to those channels down in the description, and be sure to go check out those other creators and see what they're doing, and subscribe if you want to see what I end up coming up with for next week's video. So at this point we had gotten the posts in place for this well and could start moving on to the bucket and rope and the actual turning bit there. So to do that, I just took a piece of my floral wire that I used for the trees, trimmed that down to have a little bit of excess on the end there, and then just pulled it back out, bent that to the shape of a handle, and then just trimmed off a little bit of excess there at the end. And then of course I had to just give it a little bit of a test spin there. Now for the rope of this project, I believe this string just came from a little bag or a little drawstring type thing, and then just hot glued that in place there in the middle and just began winding that up on that hole there. And for the bucket, I just took the lid to a little bottle I had and took another piece of that floral wire, bent that into the shape of a handle, and then just hot glued that down there in place. And then I also took the pliers at the end and gave those corners a little bit of a sharper edge, just to make it look a little different, not so rounded out. I'm pretty happy with how that looked, but if you have access to a 3D printer, I bet you could find some pretty great buckets that way too. Now to actually fill in the walls of these, I just took the spackling and kind of just used it as a mortar just to fill in all the edges, and once that had dried, it was time to Mod-Podge this. So from there, I was just sure to give it a nice heavy coat over the entire surface, make sure that there was no pink foam showing, just to make sure that whenever I spray paint this with a primer, none of that pink foam began to melt or deteriorate. So after that was primed, I took a sponge and some little bit of a yellow ochre, kind of dabbed off most of it, and then just kind of began randomly spackling that yellow all over there so I could dry brush over it later. I think this kind of gives your stone a little more of a natural look to do it this way, and definitely something I'll be experimenting more in the future with. And you could also throw in some other colors there, reds or pinks or anything. And I think you'd really make some nice effects there. So from there, I just took my overbrushing with some gray, real neutral, kind of a darker one, and began lightly going over the entire surface, kind of just letting the brush catch those details and highlights. And as a tip, I would recommend that you start with less and just work your way up until you get to a color and coverage that you really enjoy. It's a lot easier to add a little bit than it is to remove this paint. From there, I'll take a slightly lighter gray and just start dry brushing that with a large makeup brush, making sure to get the inside there and also grab those edges and highlights. From there, I'll just keep making that gray brighter and brighter all the way up until I get to a nice white layer, and also making sure to dry brush less and less each time just to really pull the detail out and add some contrast. So you see with this white, I just take the smallest makeup brush and really just focus on the top of these bricks as well as the corners to really drive up that contrast. And I think when you finish up with this, you end up with a really nice stone look then. You can really see some of these yellows through there, but they're very faint. And I think if you were to mix more reds and other colors in there, it would make a really nice stone effect, make it a lot more like some natural stone that you just see out in the wilderness. So from there, I'll just take my burnt umber and give a base layer to those posts, and my yellow ochre again all over that rope. Now keep in mind that for this rope I did have to do multiple coats just to get that color well on there. And then for that floral wire I just took a nice dark gray, the same one that I actually used as the base coat for these stones, and just covered up all that green with that. So from there I took some of the yellow ochre, lightened up with a bit of white, and began dry brushing, really focusing on all that grain detail on the wood and making sure not to get on the stone or anything. From there I took my plate mail metallic paint and began carefully painting over all of the metal bits on this, making sure to give it nice even paint strokes, especially on the bucket there where you have large faces, just to really keep everything going in the same direction and not draw attention to your brushwork. So now that we were approaching the end of this project, I started just cleaning up the build. So to start with that, I just went through with the black paint and cleaned up all of that splatter and overpainting on the base. Touched up some of the rope there, since it absorbed quite a bit of that paint. And from that point, I could just take my brown wash and start applying that to the build. So I started doing that with the wood to really let it soak into the grain there and really drive up the contrast and make it look a little darker. But I also applied it to the stone to add a bit of a dirty, grungier look to it, and kind of just tie the whole build together with the stone and the wood. Now once that had dried, I did go back through with my overbrushing of white to really catch those edges again and put some of that contrast back into it. You can definitely skip this final steps if you enjoy the look of the stone before that, but as a way to experiment and kind of make sure I want to tie it together a little better, I went ahead and tried it. And I also went through with a lighter yellow again and touched up that woodwork. Now once that was done, I just took some PVA glue and some of my fine flocking, mixed that into a paste, and began putting that all over the project, really anywhere that water might gather, so on tops of bricks and corners and on cracks along the base of the well. And once that had dried, we could call this project done. All in all, I was very happy with the final result. I probably spent 2 hours in total working on this project, not counting the dry time for it, and I think it makes a great addition to my scatter. Anyways, that's all I have time for today, so thank you for watching, keep crafting, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. Thank you.